Avatar 2 is The Way of Water. It is honestly probably the wettest film yet. Cinema has always been about three things: lights, camera, and how wet the 4DX water can get you. James Cameron's 2019 masterpiece Avatar 2 is no exception. Me and my family sat there in the dark as the lights went up because there was a technical difficulty, and then the lights went down again and the chairs rocked us back into the world of 2009's Pandora. The gentleman in front of me got so emotional he had to leave due to how much water was actually getting on him and his young son. No, but it was a very wet film, let's be honest. I sort of walked out of that film and just thought there's not a single frame of that film that was not absolutely soaking wet. God, do you remember the hands in that film? Like the way they gripped onto wet things, but they're aliens, but it looked so real. It's like, James, how have you done this? James Cameron, the director of the film, he's had some of the biggest films. He's in the box office of, who gives a fuck? People are obsessed with the idea that James Cameron's made some of the biggest financially successful films of all time. People ain't talking about that he's made some of the wettest films of all time, for God's sake. And you might be thinking, Myles, what are you talking about? Well, Titanic's pretty wet, isn't it? Avatar 1, less wet, I'd say. They're mainly in a forest in that one. I'll give you that. But Avatar 2, he goes back to his soaking... Because like every filmmaker has a theme they like to revisit throughout their career. Christopher Nolan, he loves time. And I've had enough of it. Steven Spielberg, he likes little weird guys. I've only ever seen E.T. No, I've seen Jaws as a little weird guy. And James Cameron seems to have a theme of wetness. The Abyss, didn't he do? Did he do the Big Abyss or something? The Blue Abyss? He has another wet film. And I was very confident walking out of that film thinking, that's the wettest film I've ever seen. And I had to think, well, is it? Let's just, before we come to such a big conclusion that Avatar 2 is the wettest film of all time, let's discuss this openly, please. So this is a list that I've spent all my life working on. The wettest films of all time. So first up on the sort of wettest films of all time, I had to go to The Little Mermaid. It's pretty consistently under the sea, up where they live. She's always thinking about what's not wet. But that is pretty, up until the end, I would say, as you can see by my graph, it's 90% wet. And I've watched all the films that were on this list, and I've made notes of every single time there's liquid on screen. And I've sort of added it all up on my notebook, and I've done sums. So you can trust the science behind this. This is proofed. Because there's fish in that. Any film with fish, I'd say, is probably going to be on this list. Can't think of any film with fish in it. Oh, Finding Nemo. Yeah, should we put that next? Anything with a fish in it is probably going to be on this list. This is basically a fish list. Spirited Away also came to mind, just because of that scene where there's water. But as you can see by the graph, it is not one of the wettest films of all time. There is 40% liquid to the 60% of dryness. But actually, maybe I should change that, because a lot of it is set in a bathhouse, where there is obviously... So let's change that to 70%. I've just looked at my notes and I've recalibrated. And I'm a guy who can recalibrate, and he's not afraid to put his hands up and say, actually, that film was a bit wetter when I thought about it. I've got a word that's coming to mind. Baywatch. Haven't seen it, actually, but I'm going to presume it's not going to be dry if they're lifeguards. Up next, we've got The Shape of Water. Now, if this film wasn't on the list, you'd probably go, Myles, you haven't seen enough films that are wet. God, I love The Shape of Water. It starts with loads of things underwater, spoilers, and then it transitions, the main character's in a bath, and then it's always raining as well in that film. Genuinely, it's a 90% film. Oh my god, I actually watched this recently. A Cure for Wellness. It came out a few years ago, but I'm catching up with cinema. Since the start, I went all the way, everyone was like, you got to check out Ant-Man Quantumania. I was like, I'm excited, let's hope it's pretty wet for my what? I'm doing this video. Why are you doing that as a video? Because it's Sunday and I haven't got much else to do. Didn't you to go for a walk? Yes, I'm going to go for the walk after this. You were all over my diary this week, man. And that's sort of like a bit of role play we've done. Yeah, people say you should go see this film, but I'm like, I'm starting from the beginning, because otherwise I won't understand it. Like as if they're all connected, which in a way they are. All art is connected. But for that to be amusing, you have to believe the idea that I believe. all the films are like a series. You can't just jump into sort of Ant-Man again. I can't think of any other film apart from Ant-Man. I really want to see it, even though I've heard people, everyone's saying, oh, it's rotten on Rotten Tomatoes. Everyone's obsessed with these tomatoes being I'm actually dressed like one. Fresh or rotten. I'm more intrigued. I'd be more intrigued with a system that based on wetness. So in this situation, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, people are saying it's dry. This isn't a good video, is it? This is really crap. I really thought this idea had more legs. I thought this film was going to be like The Little Mermaid, and it would have more legs. Like by the end of it, you'd realise, oh, it did have legs. That idea did have legs. But you know, like in The Little Mermaid, she gets legs. Going into this video idea, the only film I had in my mind was Little Mermaid, because like that's pretty wet. And the rest, I'll be completely honest with you, I've been making it up as we go along. But now I'm thinking, I have to say more films because I've spent time doing the bit before this, and if I don't upload this and edit this, I've just stood in my room alone talking about films that are so wet. So I've got to stay here now. Ant-Man and Quantumania, haven't seen it, don't know how much liquid there is in there. It would probably be quite small because he shrinks down, so even if the film's completely underwater, that would probably actually be the least wet film of all time, because when you get schmall, everything's... when Ant-Man gets schmall. Oh, A Cure for Wellness, I just remembered, that's what I started earlier. A Cure for Wellness, Gore Verbinski, that's Pirates of the Caribbean. Now we're on a roll. We're rolling because it's so wet. Let's stop this now. Cure for Wellness, vats of liquid. They go to, this is good. I'm so glad I remembered that. This is where you got to stick with things, guys, because sometimes you can be in the lowest of lows. You can find yourself in a pit and you can be down yourself like, oh heck, but you just got to stick with it and believe that some Cure for Wellness, it's a spa retreat that people travel to just chill out. I can't really remember if it's a hospital type thing or like a luxury thing that like rich people pay for, but it's a lovely massive house in the middle of nowhere, and you rock up there and go, bloody hell, I need a cure for wellness. It's an interesting title because it's almost, you don't need a cure for wellness, and you think, I'm intrigued, Gore. I love the Pirates of the Caribbean films, what you did with that. Those are soaking. We don't even need to be mentioned, even though I have done a graph for all three of them. They get wetter. We've only done the first three, but they get wetter progressively. Cure for Wellness, the idea to fix people in the resort is to have people just drink classic glasses of water. But you are thinking, well, there's a bit of a creepy vibe. I'm not sure what it is, but the way you've directed this, Gore, is I'm feeling a little unsettled. Maybe the way the camera sort of drifts over, or the way you sort of focus on a seemingly mundane activity of one of the other guests in the retreat. But it feels a bit like, this doesn't feel just like a nice retreat. And there's the thriller aspect of this film, because it turns out, twist, spoilers, careful, there is an idea behind it. It's not just water, it's sort of or is it? I can't remember. But there's that, the main guy, he discovers vats, he discovers vats of water, like in the basement, and there's a big third act that is really wet. So, as you can see by the graph, that's meant to be mentioned in this video now. So we've had that film and the other film that I've mentioned. I really cannot remember the films that I've said in this video, but we're going to say Poseidon next. Robot. It starts with a flashback of Will Smith diving underwater, and that's pretty low on the list, if I'm going to be completely honest. 15%. But in terms of how much I enjoy that film, 100. If that's okay. I love robots. Aquaman, yeah, sure. Pretty wet. Pretty wet. Haven't seen Aquaman, but god damn have I been trying to. They just won't let me. They won't let me get my hands on a copy. I want to see Aquaman. I've been wanting to see Aquaman since the day it came out. It's basically every day I wake up thinking, I'm going to go see Aquaman today. And I just go to bed being like, I didn't see Aquaman today. Submarine. Come on. It's right there. 50% wetness. The title lulls you in. It's not as wet as the title would suggest, Submarine. Brilliant film. I really didn't like it when I first saw it, and I first saw it when I was 16, like pretty close to the character's age at the time. But now I absolutely love it. Like in recent years when I've rewatched it, it's obviously so good. But it's interesting that... Is it interesting? It's definitely something. I don't know if it was because I was annoyed because I saw myself in the character. Especially being very similar in ages at the time, and still to this day, I imagine, if we were the same age then, it would make sense we'd still be the same age now. But I don't know if fictional characters grow past the credits, or if they stop, they just go back to the beginning. They grow within a window. We allow them to. Yeah, so that was pretty wet, but not obviously Jaws level. Nothing's Jaws level. Piranha Double D. I've resorted to Googling just films that are wet now. Piranha Double D. That screams 2006. Let me just check. That's 2012. That is ridiculous how, even though 2012 is 10 years ago, that should have been made way too long ago. The Bloodthirsty Piranhas, 12% on Rotten Tomatoes. Well, let's see how mathematically it works in terms of dryness or wetness. The Bloodthirsty Piranhas head towards a local water park. It's looking good for the graphs. Amidst the fun-seeking horde at the park are friends Maddie, Barry and Kyle. Oh, that's so nice. And who decide to take on the man-eating creatures. But it's that sort of genre of film. The reason I said 2006 is because I won't show you the poster, but you can guess what the image is based on the title, Piranha Double D. Oh, 3 Double D. So it's 3D, but it's like it's swimming and sort of the American Pie-ification of cinema. 1955 gave us Creature from the Black Lagoon, and you can almost see how it inspired later films like The Shape of Water. Yeah, have a look at the graph. So there we go, guys. Those are some of the wettest films of all time. What's your wettest film of all time? Let me know in the splash zone below. See you next time, guys. Stay dry, and I love you loads. I tell you what though, don't sit in a 3-hour film sipping water, because, my genes are experiencing the way of the water at the minute. I didn't piss myself.